Good morning. My name is Natasha Elkington, and I'll be your TV host for the 2 days here in Bonn, where we are focusing on the rights in the landscape for the Global Landscapes Forum 2019. And this morning, I have Tony Simons, who's the Director General for ECRAF, and one of the two co-principals for the C4-ECRAF merger. Thank you for joining me.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for being here. So please tell us, why don't we just get into it, like why are indigenous communities important for ecosystem conservation and solving the climate crisis?
So indigenous communities are fundamental to landscape management because they've been there a very long time. They've experienced unintended events and catastrophic episodes during the history of those landscapes, and so understand them tremendously deeply. And we've got to learn from that and leverage that, not just for that particular landscape, for our whole environment. Climate is what you expect, and weather is what you get. Mm-hmm. And these people are very attuned to the relationship between the weather and the cycles inside those ecosystems, the week-long cycles, the year-long cycles, the decade-long cycles. And the type of knowledge and experience and being in tune with those landscapes is vitally important for us to understand them, but also to manage other landscapes.
Mm-hmm. That's very important. So what practical steps can we take to secure rights for indigenous communities?
I think, first of all, in their formal recognition, because most of the 500 million indigenous people around the world don't have that formal recognition of the rights, of the ownership and use and access to those particular landscapes that they've been in for millennia. And we've got to recognize that, we've got to appreciate it, and we've got to make sure that their views are mainstreamed into wider economic development.
Right, very true. And I guess my next question is, how can economic development and preserving indigenous rights not only coexist, but reinforce each other?
So we're dealing with a mixed asset class in landscapes.
Okay.
There are cultural assets, social assets, to combine with the financial assets and the natural capital assets. And it's the combination and leverage and synergy amongst those that will really give us a remunerative return from those particular landscapes. And the strength of community institutions is highly correlated with how well landscapes are managed and how well they perform in terms of the ecosystem services that we want from them, the water regulation, the hydrological cycles, the temperature, the carbon storage, the buffering of all of those shocks that we're going to experience with the climate crisis in the next decade.
How do we, I think what I find is with indigenous rights is like the biggest challenges are governments, like pushing against their rights. How do we get them on board to promote them or secure them to ensure that we have a more sustainable future?
I wouldn't describe it necessarily as a conflict between the government and the peoples. It's the inadequate understanding, it's the inadequate recognition, and that inadequate appreciation of the role of indigenous people in managing landscapes. And we've got to demonstrate that. We've got to show ways in which we can show the advantage of having that. There's a fantastic project running in the northeast of Guatemala where there's timber concessions, which the government manage very well. They give to companies. However, they don't achieve the objectives of forest conservation. They utilize it and they exploit the forest, but not sustainably. And adjacent communities that are given the same access to similar sized areas manage them so much better, the offtake is much more sustainable, and the livelihoods of those people increase. And having those concrete examples to demonstrate the value of indigenous communities working there, the same in northern Tigray in Ethiopia, where you see, based on not investment from government, but based on the natural capital that is present there and the social capital of people coming together and pledging 40 days of unpaid work to work in those watersheds to to plant trees, to put in check dams, to put in flood barriers, to keep livestock out. It's that leveraging that social capital and the understanding, the human capital, the knowledge that they have, the capacity to cope and manage those complex ecosystems is what is giving us the fantastic return in places like Gigera in northern Tigray.
Wow, interesting. So I guess if we use those examples, then governments could get more on board in protecting rights of indigenous people.
To see the value and to see the benefits from those, because at the moment governments, particularly in the developing world, don't know what to do with wetlands and forests. They're really hard. They're worth perhaps $10,000 per hectare as an asset, but the revenue that government gets from them is very low. And so one of the options is to give out timber concessions. The other is to give the rights and access to those people that are living there, the indigenous communities, and to use that to generate national development and for their own prosperity of the local people.
Right. Great, thank you. So what were your key takeaways from our GLF this weekend?
Oh, I'm just so amazed at the passion, the belief, the real concrete examples that indigenous communities have shown and shared with us here this week. It is truly amazing. I think, though, that still it leaves me with a little bit of a sense that there is that under-recognition, that under-appreciation, that difficulty in breaking through some of the normative barriers. And so we've got to open up channels of dialogue, investment windows, opportunities for those communities to demonstrate not just their words and their passion, but their action on the ground for us all, to benefit those local environments, but also the wider atmosphere and climate of which we all rely upon.
Sure. Well, thank you very much, Tony. I think that was a great interview. Wish you a last great day at the Global Landscapes Forum.
Really looking forward to it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.